Weather has kind of changed on us, but we are expecting some more special people coming out of Jackson. We are going to be praying that they make it here safely and that they will be able to make it. We appreciate very much you being here with us, and we want to just thank you for taking the time out of your daily, your busy schedules to be with us. But at this time, we're going to, first of all, I want to say, our police chief is not with us this morning because he's on his way to Grenada to the funeral of the slain officer that happened earlier this week. And I think a few others are also with him. So we will ask you to give a special prayer that they make it there safely. And at this time, I'm going to ask Pastor Heidelberg if he would come up and hit the opening prayer on your program says Pastor Beal, but Pastor Beal also works for the Harrison County School System, and he gave me a call and said that they are calling all the buses, trying to get the kids out, and he's not going to be able to get here that early. So Pastor Heidelberg from Raleigh Chapel United Methodist Church has graciously agreed to give us the opening prayer and the blessing of the food.
May we pray. We thank you, O God, for the work that we do, the collaboration between churches and organizations and city and district, county officials. Continue to bless us that we may bless this community in times of disaster and also in times of chaos. We pray, oh God, that you will bless this meal, bless this fellowship, bless the hands that prepared it. These are all the blessings we ask in your Son, Jesus' name, and for his sake. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I did forget one thing, and I do want to let you know that the Harrison County Board of Supervisors would be here with us, but they are out of town, taking care of some important business for our county. So we want to make sure we include them in our prayers for a safe return home. And at this time, the food is yours.
Move along with our program, and if you want seconds, there's plenty of food. You can just tiptoe quietly, and if we have other people to come in, they can tiptoe quietly in the back. Because with our weather, we had about 70 people that registered, pre-registered. We had actually 15 of them from Job Corps who left, who came out, but then they're closing, and then they had to leave, so they came out and helped set up everything. So we will go ahead and we'll make it, it's kind of informal. It's my understanding that Rupert Lacey is also traveling to Grenada, John Johnson? It's to Grenada for the funeral of the police officer. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'll try because the remote isn't working. Okay. We wanted to bring everyone together today because as we have gone across the country, gone to other cities and other states, one key component, it seems like everyone is doing some eco-district planning, and one key component in that is disaster and emergency preparedness and prevention. And what we wanted to do was kind of assess where we were on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, because also wherever we go, people will look at us as ground zero. for, disasters, from Hurricane Katrina to the BP oil spill. So we wanted to see what we could do to better prepare our communities. That Mississippi Church Protection Act, that may be, one way, I guess, people are looking at, trying to keep our churches safe. But FEMA did develop a program back in 2013. Part of their, guide, was for active shooter. And actually, I just got back from New York about 36 hours ago. And when I arrived in New York last week, the first thing I saw on the evening news was about this bill. And the people weren't very nice about it. You know, they were very cynical about this bill. And this is part of what's on your program about the different parts, versions, what we'll be doing today. One of the reasons we looked at is ground zero, because the national average of disasters is 12. Harrison County, we've had 21. I do have that information. We have people here from Jackson County. Yes. Okay, Hancock County. Kodak County source. Jackson from EPA program in Hancock County. Oh, okay. And that's our man-made disasters. This report just came out recently from the Center for Effective Government. You have some information on that in your booklet. We won't spend an awful lot of time on that, but on the back of this program, inside, it's on the right-hand side, it gives a list of these facilities were a part of the report for our area. And if you look on the inside of that, right on the inside right, it tells you a little about Executive Order 13650, which was issued August 1st, 2013. And you have all of these agencies involved. And also, EPA has asked for a lot of areas have local emergency planning committees. And this is a community effort. It's not just elected state and local officials and police, fire, civil defense, and public health professionals, but it also involves representatives from communities and groups and the media, which the media is supposed to be coming today. So I'm assuming it will still be here. The weather has just about everyone thrown off. Please, if you're coming in, just tiptoe in the back. There's plenty of food. The title of the report was Living in the Shadow of Danger, Poverty, Race, and Unequal Chemical Facility Hazard. There is a link to that report. It's about 36 pages, but there is a link to that report, and I think you'll find very useful information from it. If you see here, well, maybe you can't see that well, but this has the chemical facilities here. I don't know if you can hear me. So you have in the green, these facilities did not report any incidents in the last 5 years. And in the yellow, facilities reported at least one incident in the last 5 years. And you can see Mississippi and Gulf Coast, you will see that we did have some reports. Overall, in this report, half of our U.S. states received the below average or failing grade, and as you can see, we're in the orange with the D. And there are some recommendations that were made. The report wasn't just critical, but it actually told, advised the things we can do to be better prepared and to have safer communities when we have facilities with chemicals, that deal with chemicals. The active shooter is part of, there's a section in the FEMA training for the active shooter, but whether you're looking at that training or if the law is enacted in our state legislature, one good thing about that law is that it does require gun safety training if the church elects to do that. So that is where our local police department would come in, and we're hoping to make sure that any house of worship in our area, if whatever route that they go, that training is involved, and we like to incorporate that in the training that we're doing, coordinate this with everything, because all of these programs exist all over the country already. Everybody is having a program, and we wanted to find out where we were in our area as far as having these local emergency planning committees. Another focus of ours is the senior citizens. That's a very vulnerable population along with low income, and a lot of times the senior citizens are on fixed income, retirement income, Social Security. That was a concern because of the many deaths. Now, I still have not been able to find Mississippi's report, but nearly half of the fatalities in Louisiana were people over the age of 74. And then there was another 71% of those who died of Hurricane Katrina were older than age 60. So that is something key that we need to look at. It's always been a concern of mine because I had two dear friends, Dr. Lewis and Ms. Hernita Maxey, who drowned in their home, and they were both in their 80s, so that's always been a concern. There are certainly some unmet needs of seniors that we would like to make sure that we address. City of Los Angeles, I just put theirs up just as an example, because you're talking about over 4 million people, and they have a very comprehensive plan, and their plan is in 6 different languages, and I just think they have a great plan. It's a neighborhood toolkit, and whereas we might not be able to do anything that elaborate, but I'm certainly hoping that we can come up with some kind of plan that would better prepare us on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And before I get to finishing up on this, one other thing, in the Weather Channel had a report out that ranked they call it the 50 worst places to own a home due to climate. Orleans Parish was number 1. Hancock County was number 2. Harrison County was number 3. And Jackson County was number 4 in that report. So that's quite alarming to have our 3 coastal counties named as one of the, at 2, 3, and 4 as the worst places to own a home. And also there's a report, and I wanted to give the pink folders to at least one to each police department and sheriff's office here, because it does have a little more information in here. There's a Clippinger report that also named the top 10 states most at risk of disaster. Mississippi is number 4. So I could go on and on with these lists, what shows us that, just some alarming stats and some things that we definitely need to be concerned about, and that's paramount to us being prepared. Also, in your folders, the one thing we have a senior citizens emergency disaster survey that we've already been doing these at senior citizen centers, and we're asking our churches to do some of these surveys so that we can assess where we are with our seniors and senior needs. One other thing in the package, that we're asking people if they can reproduce or come up with something similar. Medical records, this is something that can be a lifesaver. It's great for seniors, but just anyone, because in case of emergency, EMT hospital can just look at this and they get all the information that they need. And sometimes during an emergency, you're not able to think of everything, and if it's all written down, you have it available. This is kind of an emergency safety checklist of things. And we're going to get ready for our roundtable discussion. Once the mayor comes in, he is running late. They're not only having a funeral in Grenada, there's actually a funeral. I know when I passed by coming here, there's a funeral at my church, St. James, where I saw media and I saw quite a few people. So the mayor will be here. He is running late. And we're going to start these discussions. Now, I guess, is Mr. McFarland here from the Red Cross? And Mr. Lacy is not here either? Okay, we'll just have an open general discussion on all of that. And these are just our sponsors. Before we move on, any questions on that presentation? Okay, now, we will move on to part one, which is weather-related disasters. And of course, you know, it's kind of ironic that we're having this and we have on today and preparedness. I know one good thing, Gloria Tatum called me from EEECHO. She sent me an email and a text, wanted to know what was the contingency plan because of the weather. I didn't know what she was talking about because I had just gotten back from New York, wishing for snow. I didn't get to see any snow in New York. So, and then I came back rushing to try and get everything together for these folders and for the presentation. But it's just a good thing to always have weather contingency plans. And because we are highly susceptible to weather-related disasters. And I'm glad to see this is kind of a testament to our preparedness and prevention because they're closing the schools. That's why our Job Corps students had to leave today because they're closing, and that is quite a testament. And one other thing I need to say, thank you to our first responders. You know, I love police officers, I love law enforcement, you know, they are first, but I want to tell you that when we sent these letters out for RSVP, the police department and fire departments were the first to respond. So I really appreciate that, and them always keeping us safe. And in the, when we're looking at weather disasters, and of course, this is something that we will be able to, it won't be anything to the magnitude of Hurricane Katrina, but we had a Hurricane Katrina, a 10-year anniversary, or 10-year commemoration, and we kind of assessed where we are 10 years later. Are we better prepared than we were 10 years ago? And in what ways are we better prepared? And what unmet needs do we still have as it relates to hurricanes, when we start looking at hurricanes? And so I think when we're looking at, there were lots of ideas that came up. I think in our disaster recovery efforts, I do know that the Red Cross, and I hate they're not here to speak, but I do know that they are much better prepared to serve the community. But we had a lot of people to come in, and the first, including those first responders, when we met with our ministers, we had a round table luncheon with our ministers back at the end of December, and they were the first to say that churches from across the country were just like first responders. They came in, and they're the ones who helped our community to recover, and they really aided the relief agencies that we had. So we can find out what we're able to do as a community to better prepare ourselves and better prepare our neighbors, and certainly better care for our seniors would be one of those. And we have someone here with AARP. Okay. Yeah, and I didn't know if AARP, I do know that you have a report with some, that you are, I say a news report with some stats and concerns about seniors and disasters, but I didn't know if there were any recommendations that you had. I do know that the Red Cross has some.
Not that I'm aware of. We're more support, play a more support role than, we depend on FEMA and the EMAs to get the word to us, and then we try to disseminate it. But I don't know of any specific recommendations that we've made.
Okay. And I do know when there is a mandatory evacuation, I think all of us experience, those with parents and other elderly relatives, that they didn't want to evacuate and they don't want to evacuate. And I think that's where our churches and members, church members will come in, because elderly parents and relatives will listen to their pastors before they will their children. And I think that the failure of some of our senior citizens to evacuate probably did contribute to some of that high percentage, but there are reasons why a lot of them didn't. It wasn't just because they didn't want to, but there were reasons. And they keep saying that we don't know the actual numbers because there were so many people that maybe didn't die within a day, a week or so after Katrina, but they died, later on. Some people say a broken heart problems, but it was really devastating to a lot of our senior citizens, especially, and they did appear to be more vulnerable. We had talked about, where's Captain Satura? Did I pronounce your name? Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay. I was misspelling it, that's why I couldn't pronounce it. So I can pronounce it a little better. And I remember he said that they don't make them go. My husband and I were actually looking at the three ladies in their 80s during Katrina, and two of them didn't have children. We were kind of the only children they had, and they didn't want to evacuate. And there was one, I had promised the one that had children, we're going to get your mother, we're going to keep her safe no matter what we have to do. So I had threatened to call the police. I know they wouldn't have made them go, but I just think my threat did encourage them to come and go and evacuate with us. And one of the ones we were looking at had emergency surgery that Thursday before Katrina, and she was in the hospital. But because I had all of that information written down, they didn't have to, when we lost communication with the hospital because she was in the hospital, they had all of that information written down because she had dementia, and we actually saw firsthand how that dementia will increase during a storm. So they weren't able to remember a whole lot of things. When you have all of that information written down, it is very, very helpful. Any other questions or discussions as it relates to weather-related disasters?
I would just say this, Major Jim Adams, Flux PD. Just be advised, there's going to always be a point in a storm when we can no longer come to wherever your people are at.
Good.
And that happened. We took 262 calls during the 12 hours that Katrina sat on top of us. I'm gonna tell you a very sad story that happened, and it's very heartbreaking. It happened to one of my nearest friends, who's one of our dispatchers. Because they got calls all day long, and some were from children. And there's nothing more heart-wrenching than a child being on the phone with you, asking you to come help, because that's all they know who to call, and you can't go help them, right? One gentleman decided that he wasn't gonna go because he was in a wheelchair. And he called us when the water was at his knees, and he called back when it was at his waist, and he called back when it was at his chest, and he called back his last time when it was at his chin. And he told you what, Joetta? He said, I wanna thank you for being the last person I talked to on this earth. You tell that story. You tell that story to all your people, because we sent a 5-ton truck out, and the water moved it sideways. We almost lost some officers who were trying to help some folks in the community. But there comes a point when we have to say for our own safety, we can't go where you are. And remind people that you think that, you pick up the phone and somebody's gonna come. But there are going to be times when that will not happen. Okay?
So, yeah, I'm wondering, how do we're reaching out to the ministers, we're gonna try and do a special program for seniors. Just like you said, he didn't wanna evacuate because he was in a wheelchair. A lot of them, there are reasons like that they don't wanna evacuate. And so we've just gotta come up with ways, those stats are very alarming, 71%, over age 60. So that's very alarming, and it's just going to be imperative that we come up with ways, and we come up with programs, and we come up with plans to try to prevent as much of this as possible. And like I say, if there's a contingency plan in place to start with, I think that would be a lot smoother for them to go. And if people hear stories like that, I think that would be far more helpful. Because you can't, they're calling you and it's really too late.
It is, and one of the things that we've done as a result of this is that we have a form now that when we ask people to evacuate, we go around and say, please evacuate, and of course we can't make you evacuate from your own home. But then we have a sheet, and it's a next to contact sheet, a next of kin contact sheet. And, it's our last ditch effort to scare you into moving or going on or doing something else or letting us take you to a shelter or something. But that's something that we've done for our benefit, and hopefully it'll have a multi-purpose effect in that it tells somebody, hey, listen, they're not kidding. And on the other, it's telling us, well, at least we know, we made contact and we did the best we could, and at least maybe we can call a family member and say, hey, I got bad news for you.
Okay, so the form, next of kin form, that's a good idea. One thing I had mentioned, and our chief of police is not here, our mayor is coming, Mayor Gulfport, though I should note that Biloxi is having their city council meeting today, so that is why they did inform me that they would have been here, but they're having city council meetings. I know that I get boil water notices. I get it by text, I get it by robocall, and I get an email. I know that most of our senior citizens won't necessarily use technology, but at least a home phone, because I get the calls on my home phone as well. And I don't know if it's possible to incorporate something like this, and I do know that after Katrina, we had a hurricane scare, and I actually received a call from the governor. Governor Barlow was governor at the time. So I think things like that, that's something that kind of changed, that's something new since Katrina, in addition to the police officers going door to door. I think if we have as much outreach as possible too beforehand, that it could really save lives. So, I mean, if they can notify me, and I'm really frustrated about these boiled water notices that I get all the time, but I am happy to get the boiled water notices, because I do know that it's not, my water is safe. Any other questions or comments?
Kathy.
Yes, and then, Gloria and then John. Okay, right here.
Yes, my name's Lieutenant Houseman with the Biloxi Police Department. I'm a patrol supervisor by trade, but I wear a lot of hats for our city. One thing I'd like to mention to the group here that might help all of you folks is something that we do in the city with Biloxi Housing Authority. As a house of worship, you guys fellowship, so you all know your parishioners, you know who these folks are. Identify these folks ahead of time, because two of the biggest items that we found historically, number one, is elderly folks don't want to leave the property because of the security of their property, and believe it or not, pets. It is such a concern that Rupert and I discussed this, Mr. Lazy, post-storm, and one of the contingencies that they have now for sheltering, besides the new FEMA-style shelters that we have in place after Katrina, is a secondary area to shelter people's pets. Now, this is something that the county has done on their own, and it's not overly publicized, but it is an idea that we have kicked around in the past, because I know personally, going from door to door in 2005, a lot of folks at East Biloxi, and I remember one particular lady would not leave because she had 2 cats. Now, the advantage you're gonna have in fellowship from a house of worship is you're gonna know these people. So you can identify these people ahead of time. And I noticed, because I go to the Biloxi Housing Authority, I go to our areas and I speak to the folks every year before hurricane season. And the first, of course, in those houses, they don't always have pets, it depends on where they live. But that is their concern, what's gonna happen to their property and what's gonna happen to their pets. You know, if you have other people, and you're gonna have a lot of these elderly people that don't have a family connection in the area, you know, identify those people ahead of time too through the church. And maybe have a point of contact for them. Can you check on Mr. So-and-so? You know, the 80-year-old elderly gentleman that lives by himself that has no family in the area. If he thought he had somewhere to go, he might go. Now, I will say this, and I don't want to speak in Rupert's behest because this is his world, but there are shelters in place, but they are not the greatest places to go. They're 1,000 square foot building. You get about 10 square foot, it's gonna belong to you, which is a cot and a place to put a couple jugs of water under the cot. So, and that's the new and improved version of what we had in 2005. Those of you remember, we had people lodged in schools and everywhere else. They become very uncomfortable and a terrible place to be after just a few days. No electricity and, you know, very little rations. But you have that ability as a religious group to know who these people are ahead of time and help them prepare for this by giving them that comfort, saying, well, you know, you can relocate to so-and-so's house who has a family, they're north of the interstate, why don't you come up here and stay with us during the storm? Because a lot of folks, it's not that they don't want to go, that they have nowhere to go, and there's nothing that seems obvious or readily available. A lot of these folks are ambulatory at best and cannot drive. So it might be just a matter of reaching out to these folks, find out who they are, identifying them, and speaking to them ahead of time and say, you know, Mr. So-and-so, if you bring your dog, that'll be okay. Because a lot of folks were lost because they didn't want to leave what little bit of property they had in that apartment or that house, which you can talk people out of, but you're not gonna talk them out of their animals. We found that out the hard way.
Okay, that great point identified, because that's why we're having these surveys. Hopefully that's a start. And even if we could get churches to agree to have kind of a senior watch program in the vicinity of their place of worship and kind of take them and adopt them. And I know that we have a couple of churches who have church partnership programs. And that would be an excellent way to try to partner some of these people, like the one in the wheelchair that you mentioned, partner some of them with some of the churches who've already signed up that they were willing to take in people. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
And also post-Katrina, we came up with our early warning silence system.
Right.
Just discuss that.
What is that?
In the city of Biloxi, we have 10 warning sirens that are used for exit circle like tornado, hurricane, or something like that. For us, they're better in a tornado environment because those you don't get a lot of warning, but today with media, there's ample warning for hurricanes. Those sirens are across the jurisdiction, city, Biloxi, and then we would sound those sirens if a tornado. You gotta remember the difference between watch and warning. If there is a tornado sighted in the area, those sounds are available. That's another early warning system. But what I've found with elderly folks, number one thing is television. And a lot of them are still gonna have landline telephones. They're gonna have some people with cell phones, but they're gonna watch WLOX. And, they're gonna want to. That's where they're gonna get their primary information.
And then even in the churches, we do have as part of that program, for part of the FEMA-based program, to where, you know, if you're in church doing tornado warning, where there'll be tornado drills and all of that. So we'll be helping churches with that. Gloria and John.
Okay. I'm Gloria Tatum. I am a retired environmentalist from the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. One of the areas that I was over was our emergency response section. I'm sure some of you officers have worked with some of the guys that actually used to work for me, Eric Deere. We have George Merbaney, people like that, and MDEQ usually go out and do training, you know, on those of you who are first responders. Sir, I appreciate what all of you all are saying, because basically the biggest problem we have as first responders is trying to make sure that people are safe. And not only do they put themselves in a bad position, they put us in a bad position. I can assure you, before Katrina hit, my sister who lives on the coast, I called her about a day before Katrina hit. I said, hey, it's time for you to get out of there. I'm here, but I'm going back to Jackson, and it's time for you all to get out of there. And she says, well, I think I'm gonna just sit it out. I said, who the hell is she talking to? Obviously, she's not looking at the same thing that I'm looking at. My sister, who happens to be Miss Eklund here, blood sister, same mom and daddy, and she wasn't going anywhere. And she was nowhere near 70 years old. And I'm sitting up here fussing, trying to get her out to follow me out. And she didn't want to do it. Well, I actually knew I was going to have to come back anyway, okay? Just based upon the nature of my job, I knew I was going to have to come back. But I had to also get back to make sure that we had people ready and in place to be able to deploy to get to South Mississippi. Well, you all think it was bad here on the coast. It really was bad, because when I got here, I'm telling you, I was in tears until I got to New Orleans. And then I was so grateful for Mississippi, because there was a different type catastrophe over there. And I'm probably going into my whole little speech. But when you see those oil refineries going down, and you're there to have to be able to step into that, that's something totally different. When you come to Mississippi and you see casinos and boats in the middle of the street, I mean, that's horrible. But the main thing that we need to know as a community, we need help from everybody, because one of our biggest concerns was that we didn't know how to get to people. When you have trees that's across the street and you can't get to them, and we had community organizations that was organized that could get to people to help out, that certainly would have helped those of us who are first responders out better than we did. Coming from Jackson, trying to get to the coast, do you know how many cans of Fix-A-Flats we had to buy just to get, because of the metal debris and all of that, trying to drive here to get here? And so I hope we've learned from those experiences. But the main thing is to make sure that we get people mentally prepared to leave. When we say leave, we mean leave, because if you see helicopters coming in, and if the wind is high, you know that those first responders are in danger, right? We know that. because the wind could just blow them away, just like the water can take you away. So those are some issues that we dealt with, that we hope that we have learned from. I hope that everybody in my family has learned from that. And I hope that we are in a better position to be able to say, this is serious. Get off the phone and get out of here, okay? Now, with some of the guys and ladies that we work with, I mean, when we look at the train derailments, and you want to know what am I supposed to do if the train derailed, getting to know the ladies and gentlemen here in this room, your first call will be to them. MDEQ, which is the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, is going to send some environmentalists in, but you all are here before we could get here from Jackson. And so you're a lot more knowledgeable, and you're right here on the ground before we ever make it here. Some of the things that people don't realize that you have to be aware of, those of us who are first responders, there's some little chemical signs that's on the sign, on the side of those train cars, those rail cars, that tell us what's in that car. And based upon what's in there, determines whether or not it's flammable or non-flammable. Those are things that these officers have to know to be able to know whether or not they need to evacuate people. If there is an evacuation plan in place, that comes from the police department. They make that determination. And I can assure you, the environmentalists have not always gotten along with the law enforcement the way we used to years and years and years ago. I can recall having a friend, George Campaign, and he was here working one of those trucks that had overturned. And then there was a highway patrolman guy who came up and said, who in the hell is in charge of this operation? I need this highway opened up. And he says, sir, in all due fairness to you, I'll open it up. But I can assure you, if that truck blow up, those people's lives are gonna be in your hands and not mine. At that time, the guy is now Commissioner Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz and George now are best buddies because both of them had a job. All Santa Cruz wanted was that highway opened up. George wanted to make sure that that truck didn't blow up. So there are a lot of moving components, and so I'm happy that you are having your session on the reports that you have. I don't know who wrote the reports about Mississippi, but I will put Mississippi up against any state there is in the United States because I know that we're the best. Thank you.
And I did learn my lesson from Katrina. I have been on a mission ever since Katrina. I tell everybody that was kind of a wake-up call, a big wake-up call. John.
Yes. I just want to say a few things about hurricane preparedness. During hurricane preparedness, I was on the Harrison County School Board, and we lost some schools, and a number of our people had to live in the school. Since that time, Harrison County School District has built 2 hurricane shelters, and they are 361 standards to withstand hurricane wind. Also, what they have done in Harrison County School District is put hurricane shelters on all buildings. That doesn't mean that the hurricane proof what they have hurricane shelters on them, but they put hurricane shelters on there to sort of help that. And another thing I think that the churches can do in house of worship is identify the parents of the membership that has pets in their home. And not only that, but also find a place where they can take those pets to be secure. Because I'm gonna tell you something, parents that have pets, children that have pets, they're not gonna leave those pets behind. If you go there and say you're gonna take them and leave their pets, it's a losing battle. So we have to find a place to keep these pets for these parents. That's the main thing. When you get the pet safe, you can take the parent, and there we go. Well, if you do, if you take, they're not gonna leave their pet behind. That's just the way of life it is, that's the way it is. And I'm sure some of these officers that have been through that find out that they're not gonna leave their pets behind. I'm sure there's more testimonies about it. These words is final. Thank you.
So, I know, Gloria, you mentioned partly about the train overturn, because we do have trains coming through our state that, you know, carry a bunch of hazardous material at that time. We're going on to part two now. We can go back and forth, that's part of that. And we recently also had a truck to overturn again on the highway. And MDEQ came down, it was some hazardous material. And I think they even had to replace the roadway, whatever it was. I've forgotten exactly what it was, because I was out of town. Does everybody remember what I'm talking about?
The railing, the bridge railing they had to replace, didn't they?
No, they had to replace something.
I'm not really sure which incident, but I mean, we're all over, so,
Yeah,
so it helped me to remember.
was it Hancock County?
Was it in Gulfport or Biloxi?
I think it was Hancock County, and it was on the interstate, which is good.
Hancock County?
It was over Hancock, right close to state line, yeah.
Hancock, okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't, you know, it was on I-10 too, right? So it wasn't in a populated area. And I guess most of the time, they don't come through residential areas, or they try to avoid residential areas. So I'm assuming that that's one good method of prevention. But like say in train derailment, because I live not far from a train, and in case of a trail derailment, I guess the media, we have, and with Mr. Lacy not being here, it's kind of difficult. So I assume that our local people and news, that would be what you would watch, to know whether you should stay inside or whether you should leave, because you just, you know, you don't know, depending on, I assume, on what chemical it is.
Well, a lot of cities now have the radio system where they can text you. I'm not real sure if any of the cities here have it, but if a train derailed, there are times when you can get text messages from it. If you're not near your phone or whatever, you, a lot of times some of the officers may go out from door to door trying to get people evacuated if that have to happen. But yeah, but certain trains do go into communities, into neighborhoods and everything. And so that's just an area where the environmentalists along with the officers have to work together. And usually the officers make that determination based upon whatever chemical, if there is a chemical spill on the train. Sometimes it's not chemicals on.
Yeah, but I guess if it's too dangerous for the residents, it would put the officers in danger, so they wouldn't ever be a situation to where they wouldn't be able to go door to door. But this text message system, and I'm just not sure how, I don't even remember how I got connected to it for the water thing, and then I get Amber Alerts too. So I would just think, since we already have something like that in place, how difficult would it be to make sure that we're covered for situations such as that? Melissa?
Yeah, I'm Melissa Parker. I'm with the Office of Environmental Health with the Health Department. And we have an application for a smartphone. I know that a lot of elderly people might not have a smartphone, but just for the general public, called Mississippi Ready. And we put all that information on that application. So if we know that there's going to be if there's a train derailment or anything like that, we usually put that information out through our application. So that's a good resource to have. It's a free app that you can put on your smartphone. Also, it's important to know that the health department, you know, what do most faith-based organizations do when there's a disaster? They're going to open up a what? A shelter, right? So it's important to know that the health department comes by and takes a look at those shelters. We're not coming to do an inspection and write you up for anything. We're coming to make sure that you have resources that you need. If we get to a shelter and we notice that it's extremely overcrowded, or that you don't have enough bathrooms, or you don't have enough paper towels, whatever it is that you need, we'll work with your local EMAs to make sure those resources get pushed to those shelters. And it's also important to realize too, is that we have special medical needs shelters. It's like the gentleman that's in the wheelchair, he may have some medical issues that he doesn't feel like he wants to be in a regular general population shelter. We also have special medical needs shelters that we've opened up, and those are staffed by nurses, by health department nurses. So they can help, folks that have diabetes, or they're on insulin, or they might be on oxygen, 24/7. And, those people can be looked at by a nurse, whereas in a gym pop shelter, you're probably not gonna get looked at by a nurse. So that's just a couple of things to think about. And it's important also, if you're gonna open up the shelter, contact MEMA and let them know that in the event of, you don't have to do it during the emergency, but if you think that you might be willing to open up the shelter, contact MEMA and let them know. They put those, shelters on a board that we look at, and we make sure that we have, environmental staff that go out and nurses that go out, and take a look at those shelters and make sure that they have all the resources that they need.
You just answered something that I was going to ask.
And I'm sorry about all your blue
No.
water notices, I cannot do anything about that, but I'm glad to hear that you're getting them.
Yeah, no, as long as I know, I wish they would, just go ahead and remediate the cause, but anyway, the inspection, and the reason I was concerned about that and wanted to know about that, I used to own a preschool center, so I know I had numerous inspections every year, and it was all good, but I think you made a lot of good points. So, just a couple of questions. Is there any coordination within, like, AARP and, the area agency on aging?
Yes.
Where you know about this information? And
Some-
did you have that before Katrina? Is this something that came up?
No, we had.
Okay.
We had
Alright,
this
okay.
before Katrina, absolutely
Okay,
none,
great,
none.
great. Okay.
We didn't have any apps like that before Katrina, but we have them now. I'm with the
Well, I didn't
Division
mean
of
that,
Aging.
but I mean knowledge where people would know that they can go for medical needs.
Yeah. We have a clientele of, we work with the elderly and disabled, we provide service for the elderly and disabled in the home. And so we kind of educate them when we go out to their homes on different things that's in the community, keep them up to date on what's going on.
And we're kind of the connection.
Yes.
We see seniors in our activities, daily, weekly, monthly, special programs. And we make sure that they have the resources that Area Agency on Aging is offering through Lydia's program.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just paramount to have these interconnections so that, you can have all the good stuff out in the world available, but if nobody is aware of it, it's not doing very much good. So that's why we wanted to kind of do some coordination and find out what's available, because I didn't know that was available, and we do a lot of community outreach. So, as long as we know the community is aware, then that does give us, we're a lot further along than we were 10 years ago, and I think that's a good thing.
Our, Bureau of Emergency Medical Services also coordinates with local ambulance services and, makes sure that there's plenty of, emergency response vehicles to respond as well. I know that just from working some of the smaller events that we've had, we have a lot of resources where we can get folks to people that, that need help. Also, we have, and I don't know if y'all are aware or not, but during the tornado in Louisville, we were able to evacuate a nursing home that was adjacent to the hospital just in record time, just because of all the local support that we had and the emergency medical services community. We were able to get all those people relocated to another location. It was just a really heroic effort on the part of the local law enforcement and local folks that worked EMS. We even have what we call ambuses. They're actually buses that we've converted into ambulances, and they will they'll hold several people, whereas ambulance is only going to hold one person usually or two. but they'll hold several people. So we have a lot of resources. There's a lot of stuff that the health department does. We don't just give shots and worry about your flu vaccine. So we do a lot more than just that. So a pretty robust EMS department and Office of Emergency Planning and Response.
And is there, how would the community know about the ambuses?
We'll deploy those as needed, and we'll do that. You know, we have to remember too, and I know law enforcement knows this, events start where? Locally.
Yes.
It's a local, it starts at the local level. And, we have to remember, to kind of stand back sometimes and let the local folks do what they need to do. And then when they need us to come and help, then we're there to help. I know that during Katrina, EPA decided they would come down and help us run all the water systems, and that is not what we needed. We needed them, and I hope they're not here. We needed them because they give us a lot of money. We needed them to back off and let us do our thing and get our sea legs and figure out what we needed to do. But, it's hard for, state agencies a lot of times to, not want to jump in there and do a lot of stuff we probably don't need to be doing. So we like to try to keep it local and then get involved when they want us to. So
I don't think that anybody, I think that all those agencies knew that they needed that to be done differently. I'm gonna tell this and then I call on Captain Statira. I said it now, I can't say it again. But, I went to FEMA, had a meeting with Administrator Fugate and his senior staff. And, the minute I introduced myself, I said from Gulfport, Mississippi, he just kind of covered his face, Katrina, that's usually what they do. But they took me all over and they showed me everything that they have done, as a lesson learned from Katrina. So we all learned very, very valuable lessons with Katrina, even the people who were in charge, learned valuable lessons, and I think they learned those lessons from the community. Captain Statira?
Just a couple of quick things. I know, talking about the ambuses, AMR actually does have an ambus here, and basically it's a converted school bus that are taking the seats out and set up where they put stretchers in it. So they can actually deploy that fairly quickly if need be, and I think they've actually rolled it out on a few things that we had concerns on. And another thing is the further away we move from Katrina, the less people remember and think about things. We can sit here and we can discuss things all day long, but, they're not gonna listen to you or me. They'll listen to their preacher though, y'all are right. They're gonna listen to their preachers whenever the preacher says, look, you need to go. And we have this spot set up for you. I caution kind of using some of the houses of worship to set up as shelters simply because you're kind of on your own with that. Whenever MEMA or Red Cross or somebody like that opens up a shelter, they're committing to support it. That's not what you're going to have for the most part on very thin resources. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do set it up. Make sure you do notify MEMA, even though they're probably not going to be able to provide you any support. I know pre-Katrina, we were told to be self-sufficient for 48 hours. Now they're saying 72 maybe hours post, you may get something. And when we say something, it may be a pallet of water showed up for 50,000 people. So those are things to keep in mind that, whenever you commit to things, you have to be plan on being self-sufficient for a week with no outside help. So just kind of think about that.
So what are we saying? Are we telling them to go to the neighbor's house, go north of interstate, go way north? Or
We're telling them anytime we can to get out of the area completely.
And what do you mean the area you're saying?
I'm saying go east or west. Go east or west, because even if they're here, there's still a tie on the resources that we have. Whereas if they're in Mobile, they have sufficient resources in place there to where they can go to the grocery store, because everybody remembers Mobile is the closest place you can go shop.
Right.
So that's the things you have to look at. But sometimes we have to caution with that, because if you tell people to go to New Orleans and all of a sudden it shifts a little bit and goes to New Orleans, so you have to be able to plan to go far enough away. I don't recommend north, because as you go north, then you pick up tornadoes. We had, you know, a lot of water here, but they took a brunt of wind and tornadoes up there that a lot of people don't even realize.
That's right.
So that's why we tell east or west. And more often than not, if Louisiana ever puts contraflow back into place, you're not going west. You've got no choice but to go east. So.
And after I knew that I needed to leave, I did go to Mobile. So, and my son and daughter stayed, which I almost had a heart attack because I'm worried about them. And my daughter said, I don't think Mobile is far enough. I said, it's further than up on I-10, which was where she was with Grandma Ruth over there and her family. But I just know that this is all very good information when we're working with the ministers and the churches, so that we can have our people safety. The mayor just came in, and I'm going to ask you to come up and you can make some closing remarks, since you, not right now, and we have 2 more sections. But we were talking about the possibility or the feasibility of being able to send out notices like the boil water notices in cases of emergencies. And I know I get a call on my house phone, my cell phone, and I get a text and an email, which is great, because I just forwarded it to the rest of the family. I don't even remember how I got it set up. I must have had to go and register somewhere. But is that something that can be expanded for other emergencies?
Yes, we actually do that for other emergencies. And if you want to sign up through the city of Gulfport, you can go through our 311 call center and they can get you set up with however, and we actually utilize that if we have an emergency event where we need to put out notices, because that is actually a unique system in that we can specify to a certain area, we can do it citywide, we can do whatever we need to with it.
Okay. What about Biloxi? Do you have anything like that set up?
The reverse 911 system is probably our best resource.
What's the reverse? Is that the same, like a 311?
No, we reverse the 911 system and send out messages to
Okay.
the phones that are on the other end.
Okay, good. And how do you get the phones? And do you sign up?
Whatever telephone that you own.
Oh,
If
okay.
you have a telephone that will call 911, with the reverse 911 system, it'll reverse and go out to those phones and send out.
Great.
So no one has to sign up for the program. Anyone who has a landline has automatic recall.
Something after Katrina too?
It's been around historically. It's expensive to use, like the major said, but it's been around for a while. But it's a good system for notifications. But today's society, almost everybody,
Has cell phones, yes.
and if they don't, I mean, I use the WLOX app, not advertising for them, but the information is fast and it's current, and it usually sends you a link to whatever weather system that you can look at and then make your own opinion, because nobody's gonna know more about your situation than you. That's whether or not you need to leave. And just one quick thing to add to what we were talking about earlier. August 29, 2012, a Category 1 storm by the name of Hurricane Isaac came right down Biloxi, right down Gulfport, right through the middle of everything. Now, that was a big testament to the resiliency of the entire community, because all of this conversation is stemming around a storm that happened in 2005. Well, because of what happened in 2005, the steps that were taken, that storm that came in 2012 is almost forgotten. So there, we sit here and talk about some of the things that we need to do. We also need to realize there's been a lot of success since then, and a lot of things that were handled much differently in 2012, because that was an 80-mile-an-hour plus storm. They came in and the communities handled it very well, and because of the lessons learned 7 years before that, I think we're much more prepared than we were.
And I think the hospital really did it right. I know that their staff comes in, they just move in.
On evacuations, if you hear this, you don't want everybody to take off
sometimes we're gonna ask you to shelter in place. It has a lot to do with, whether it's a gas or a liquid, if it's lighter than air or heavier, if it's gonna settle and float in the air. Wind speeds have a lot to do, wind directions have a lot to do with chemicals and those type of hazardous materials that are out there. So, listen to your local news, let the fire department, their hazmat teams get in there and find out exactly what we have. They talked about derailments and things like that. You can have a tank car just leak. It doesn't have to derail, and they're gonna stop it so it doesn't continue to spread that chemical down the railroads. And that has to be mitigated, whatever that issue may be. They keep, MSDA issues a bill of lading on those, in the rail cars. We find out what it is from the conductor. We'll find out what that chemical is. There's hot zones and cold zones. There's a certain area that you have to stay out of. Those areas will be determined by the hazmat teams as they go in. They will create those hot zones, and that's the area that no one's allowed in. But you have to really listen to the evacuations. You don't want to evacuate and actually put yourself in harm's way by going into the chemical that may be blowing a certain direction. So they're treated different than what we call a natural disaster like a hurricane or something. So the best thing, like is social media. Listen to your local news and listen to what they tell you. We're going to be sending things to our information officer. That information officer will pass it on to the news media. We'll get that out there and let the community know what they need to do.
Okay. And we're going to be looking at ways, because I know that WLOX app, but when you're talking to a lot of senior citizens, they wouldn't know what an app is, so we got to figure out.
They got that TV.
Yeah. And
WXXV, there's some other radio. There's a lot of good ways to get that information out there.
And I noticed on that report, on the chemical plant, they listed the responsible agencies, and I noticed that the fire department was listed on almost all of them. Some of them, the Biloxi Fire Department, and then Gulfport, Casper Stand, so,
And we have mutual aid where we all work with each other,
Right.
so that, if Gulfport needs our assistance, or we need Gulfport's assistance, or any other city around, we have people who are trained and specialized in those areas that will go in. We have a decon tents where we may have to clean somebody up, basically. We use words that y'all understand, but wash them down, get the chemical off of them. You don't want to transport somebody who's full of chemicals to the hospital. We need to decon them first and then get them to the hospital. Including our firefighters, once they come out of that hot zone, they need to be taken care of. So those are things that we'll work with each other to make sure that happens.
okay. Captain Statira.
Just two quick things. The reverse 911 has been around for a while. We actually utilized it in 2003, February, I don't remember the exact date, when we had channel chemical leak with the anhydrous ammonia. We actually instituted the reverse 911 for that, and they are right, it is rather costly when we do that. That's why the city actually purchased their own system for it. The other soapbox I'll have, and then I'll get off of it, go with reputable news sources whenever you're depending things on your decisions. And when I say that, Facebook is not a reputable news and you would be surprised at how often, especially during disasters or anything else, we end up having to respond to Facebook things that, oh, well, I heard this person over here was trapped and all of that, and then we end up having to go figure out that person never existed. So it puts a strain on our resources as well. But make sure if you're going to do anything or make any decisions, do it off of reputable news sources.
Makes sense.
And when I mentioned social media, for instance,
Right.
we have our own Facebook page. The city has its own pages. That will be reliable. We don't put anything on there that's not reliable information. Not everyone can put things on our Facebook page. And we find that so many people use social media that by creating our own page and getting information out in that fashion is the best way to do that. So he's absolutely correct. But
Facebook from your friends is probably not.
But it is my understanding Gulfport has its own Facebook page. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the time here, and any more remarks before we go to the next item on our agenda? Which is hostage and active shooter emergencies, and I put under there, accompanying this discussion, Harris County Sheriff's Department, Gulfport Police, Biloxi Police, and Pascagoula Police. I have the key folders I mentioned for the police department, only because I had, a little bit more information in there. I was in Atlanta last month, and they had this big training, on the hostage and active shooter emergency. And that seems to be, you know, what they're having in a lot of cities and states around the country. But this has to be done in conjunction with our local law enforcement. And I didn't know if you had any comments on that. You know, earlier I did put up about the new law that's coming out, and you know, that you get a little squeamish about that, you know, when you're looking to having armed security, in your churches. But I attended mass in New York at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I had to open my bag, you know, I mean, that's just, you know, since 9/11, something that you've had to do, and that's kind of a way of life. As a matter of fact, I was in Paris in December, and same thing happened going to Notre Dame, going to mass, you're having to open up your purses, so, I guess we do need to take whatever measures that we need to secure our places of worship. Any comments, anything, because this is something that, you know, when we're working with the churches, this can be something that they can either deal with and they don't have to take this part of the training or not. But I do know that it was alert, and I assume that the law enforcement agencies are aware of that. They seem to do a lot of training. I'm actually in contact, since I'm the Environmental and Climate Justice Chair for the National Board of NAACP. I'm actually in contact with people all over the country, and a lot of communities are having this training, and I didn't know whether our law enforcement, Gulfport's had it. What about Biloxi? Great.
I think they actually teach it in the academy level now too.
Very, very good, very good. Let me say, now, I'm like my sister when it comes to defending Mississippi, because I travel all over. I don't allow those negative comments. I don't allow them about our police department. I don't allow them about our state. Because no state is any better off than Mississippi is. And people will come here, and then they're like pleasantly surprised, and I'll sarcastically say, well, what did you expect, to be hung when you came here? And they, yeah. And then they're pleasantly surprised at the way that they're treated. And I'm really surprised that people still have these stereotypes when it comes to our state. And I do not tolerate it for 1 second. I used to always post on Facebook, and it didn't happen in Mississippi, you know, because they always want to put everything on Mississippi. So, any comments on the hostage and active shooter emergencies?
I have a question.
Okay.
And I thought of it when you did the original presentation.
Okay.
Because it said, run, hide, and then fight. And it's my understanding that that has somewhat changed, has it not?
It's still the general principle that is taught. You can run if you can escape, hide if you cannot do that, and if you're discovered or you have no place to hide, then fight.
But if she pulls out a gun sitting right here next to me, whether or not I have training or not.
I'm the worst shot ever, you know.
Pick up that chair and start. I mean, really, that's what they're
From
saying.
it at that situation,
You don't
right?
have any other choice.
You go with what you have options to at that time. If you have time to run, then you run.
Yeah.
If you have time to hide, you hide. If all you have time to do is fight, then fight.
Pick up that chair, pick up, I mean, if she has a gun, that chair is your weapon. But,
You know, you're safe.
Yeah, because we had one minister to ask us, he said he had concerns about the deacons when they take up the collection. You know, and they're just concerns about, you know, safety, when it comes to that. So I don't know what kind of, if there is any specialized training, you know, other than what we have in the FEMA. I know that Alert, does some training on that, but that's strictly for law enforcement. But I do know that, FEMA, that's basically what they're saying, and that's what Alert is saying, you know, run, hide, and fight.
I was just gonna say quickly, Department of Homeland Security has some really great pamphlets on their website that addresses what to do in business places, what to do in houses of worship. They're only 3 or 4 pages long, they're real simply written, and, they have little checklists in them, and it's at the Department of Homeland Security website.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Melissa.
I was just gonna say that we had to, I work for a guy who's a former, fire chief, and ICS is his thing, all day, every day. But he asked us to take the active shooter course that I think Homeland Security had on their website. And I'm just gonna, that's a frightening and sobering video to watch. Has a lot of good points to it, but, you know, if you've never thought of something like that, wow. I realized the office that I was located in, my option is to hide. There's no way I can get out of there. So it's a really sobering, training to go through, and it really makes you, has made me kind of hyper aware of where I am at all times now, because you know it can happen anywhere. So it's just a really good thing for just anybody to do. It doesn't have to be, you know, somebody just in law enforcement or somebody that, you know.
And I think the school shootings have made us more aware. And I think that now the church shootings are helping us to be more aware as well. FEMA had this, training and this in their guide back in 2013. So this was before the shooting in South Carolina.
We have learned that many of the churches in Jackson County do have plans, active shooter plans. They're not very well publicized because they don't want the wrong person to get the information about the plan, but they have developed plans. And I guess as a parishioner, you could always ask somebody, do we have a plan?
I don't know how the police department feels about having armed people in the church, but that would scare the daylights out of me.
We have armed people everywhere else, so.
Yeah, okay.
I tell you right now, I'm armed when I go to church.
Okay. But the training, now that was the good thing that was about the bill. It is required training for that. So who would do that training? Does anybody know enough about the proposed law?
Lieutenant Michael Bromley in Biloxi. The House bill has actually been proposed numerous times in the past. This is just a 2016 evolution of that same House bill. It's failed at least 3 years in the past. It really doesn't break any grounds. It addresses the ability to defend oneself against a deadly attack. And all it kind of does is we have that with the governor's newly signed addition to the open carry law, which allows for purses, satchels, and cases, you know, to have a weapon in it. So people ought to go to church armed. Whether or not a church administration condones that or has a plan for that, that's something between, you know, everybody's individual house of worship and their leadership. But the House bill that you had up in the very beginning, right now, it just pretty much says that if encountering a deadly attack during service, a group of security members that are designated by that church have the right to essentially shoot and kill that threat, and it be justifiable homicide. That's what that law is proposed. Really, that already exists. as Major Wills pointed out to me earlier in conversation about that, anybody has a right to defend themselves currently against a deadly attack, and it can be seen as justifiable if the circumstances dictate that attack. So I don't see that House bill, proposed now 486, to really have any impact, other than creating a little confusion. But if you look at the history of the bill, it's been proposed about 3 times in the past. And then you can actually go online now and read the details of the bill, and the legislative body comments about it. So whether it passes or not, I'm not here to say. But I don't see it impacting us really any great amount at all.
And as long as people are trained, like I couldn't mind going to church, with anybody, as long as you have the training, so. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Miss Kathy?
Yes.
And to your body, in regard to what the officials are saying, I'm a pastor of St. John Baptist Church, a very, very busy location on Dido Road. In regard to, and Dr. Marsh as well, in regard to what you're saying about this House bill, many times I'm standing in the pulpit and it's always on my mind. I'm always watching the front door punches me because of the mere fact of our community and our culture now. So is there anything that we as ministers, I think I heard someone say something about the House bill, and that there's I don't know if it's a website or something you can watch or something you can read about, but I think it would really be nice if the ministers could just, would have a location that we can go and maybe sit down and look at a video and prepare ourselves and make ourselves get some education on how to embrace these things, because it's always on my mind every Sunday. I don't know, I'm not scared, but I have a congregation and we don't carry staffs anymore, you see, so we need to have something that we can protect our congregation with. And I'm talking to these ministers, okay? Now, David, that's not many David being born can kill lions and bears, okay? So my point is, we need something that we can protect our congregation with.
Well, Pastor, I'll be calling you to set up a time when we can come to your church next month.
Well, I need you ASAP.
We will be there next month. I wanted to kind of get all the information that we had from our local people, rather, because we were saying it's a FEMA-based training, but our base is right here. These are the people that I look to. These are the people who I am comfortable with, that they're protecting me. So, like she said, sometimes you can get people far off that can, easily put a program or a training guide together, but there is nothing like the experience and the knowledge that's sitting right here in this room. So before we did that, we wanted to make sure that we had the benefit of their experience and knowledge, and I have all kind of notes here that I'm taking that will help this to be a better training next month.
And thanks for the invite. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, yes.
I would like to go back to the seniors.
Yes.
And just talking about the
That's
emergency.
next on the agenda.
Just talking about the emergency information on the seniors, and say it's good to have it with them. What I found out with the military, I have a card in my pocket. Every type of medication that I take and everything, allergies and everything, I carry in my wallet. And if a person, matter of fact, would get that information, it's a small little piece of paper like a card, and can keep that on them, it can save somebody's life.
And I don't know, there's been some attempts before at trying to get all of this information, in a database where it can be easily accessible to everyone. Fortunately, I have a doctor that does this. So I was walking on the beach and I fell last year and went to the emergency room, and they actually had all my information from her. They had all of that listed. But this is the reason why we put kind of this sample form in here. One of the ladies that we looked after eventually had to go to assisted living, and they had this on file. So even if you have it on file in your church, if you make sure that a resident has it on file, I keep mine updated in my computer, one for me, one for my husband, and a lot of times he'll forget stuff when he goes to the doctor. And so if I'm out of town and he has a doctor's appointment, he has, I just print it out for him. And he keeps these in a folder. So, and he does keep a copy in the glove compartment. And we did the same thing for our nephew. So, just anything, like you said, that would notify people. But the EMS, every time they had to come out to see about one of our seniors, they always bring about that information every time we took.
It's an orange card that we put in the hands of every senior that we can, with a magnet, to keep on their refrigerator, and now we're urging them to keep it in their car. This is in Jackson County.
Okay, all right. Any ideas of anything that we can do to try to make sure that we do better about our seniors? Because as was mentioned earlier by the gentleman from Biloxi, we have made a lot of progress. That's just one area where I think we still have considerable vulnerabilities that we should address. And anything, because, you know, you're basically dealing with a human and people who you want to respect, you know, your elders, but you want to protect them at the same time. So we're just looking at ways, and like you say, you can't force anybody to do anything, but I think that if there's a plan ahead of time, then it's a lot better to keep everyone safe.
Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Can we make copies?
Yes, that's why I put it in there. That's why I didn't connect it to anything. It's put in there, and then, like I said, we'll be doing these senior surveys. If any of you would like to assist and get some of these surveys filled out for us, so that we would be able to better identify the needs of our seniors and better able to go to ministers in the neighborhood where seniors reside, to try to see that we have sometimes, you know, we used to have neighborhood watch programs. We can have something for seniors, a senior watch program that would help us to look after our seniors. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question for seniors in relation to emergencies, tornado surgery, whatever. A lot of the seniors don't have transportation. So is there anything in either of the cities or in the county that would allow a very means for getting them out?
Both CTA and AMR coordinated. Somebody that has special needs or something like that, and AMR can transport them, otherwise CTA will a lot of times go around and actually pick people up from their homes and take them to the shelter.
Well, what about if not disabled?
So what would special need, being elderly in and of itself be a special need?
The only requirement I think is that you don't have transportation now.
Oh, okay.
Ma'am, add something to what Captain Couture said. If you contact CTA ahead of time, they'll take your information. If you have no other way to get to a shelter in a storm, you can contact CTA and they'll take your information ahead of time. You can do that now.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Mayor, you weren't here to open us up, but you're certainly here at the right time.
Thank you, Kathy. I know that the weather coming is on everybody's mind. Thank you so much. And with Captain Statura, look, we just call him Neil. We don't have to worry about that.
I know, but I was determined to learn how to pronounce it. Sure.
I apologize for not being able to do the opening. My life has become a series of overlapping events like most of y'all. I just got a million things going through my mind, and of course some of the things about our vulnerability and the way our society has changed. Who would have thought 10 years ago we'd have to go into a movie theater and figure out what our exit plan is? We go to movies to get away. We go to church to be refreshed and reinvigorated, and we got to think about these things. And I guess it's just a fact of life. But one thing I've learned in my short time as mayor is how good our law enforcement folks, our fire department, our emergency personnel, our first responders are, not just in Gulfport, but across this entire coast. Matter of fact, I've been fortunate to see a lot across the state, and there's none better on this coast, and I thank y'all for doing that. It's not a placation. The One Coast thing we talk about, it's not just a slogan. It is about how we outreach from the Ministers Alliance to the agencies, to nonprofits. We're all symbiotic, we're all in this together, and functions like this, Ms. Story, thank you for your patience with me and your persistence. You're welcome. But and your advocacy, because there are needs, and if we don't communicate it and share it with one another, we're not as effective as we can be. But I have a great deal of confidence and appreciation for the work that goes in on a volunteer and a professional basis. What you do is critical to our quality of place and how we take care of those who are most in need, especially. So I just thank you. I appreciate you being here. Didn't have much of a role to play, just more listen and learn too, but thank you for including me and involving me. Y'all stay safe in this weather. We're about to go to Gulfport to determine, if we let our folks off a little early, but the county's getting off at 3 for what it's worth, and other agencies are letting people off just in preparation for a storm that I hope it's a non-event.
Yeah.
But we always got to be ready. So God bless y'all. Thank you.
And we're really grateful to all of you who did, brave these bad weather warnings to come out today. And especially to our people who came all the way from Jackson, Melissa, and Gloria. Thank you so much. When she asked me about the contingency plan, I told her that safety was number one. We wanted to be around to make the presentation another day, so safety was number one. But they came out here, and we're really grateful for it. So Pastor, we have everything we need. We'll be ready to come and do your training at your church and any churches. And there was one other, that was Pastor, the one that's a musician for your church? Braxton, yeah. His church is next, so we will try and schedule as many as we can and try to have kind of an annual event around August of every year, just to, see our progress and how far we've come. Any other questions? Pastor, would you come and dismiss us in prayer? Thank you so much. We actually started on time, and we're in about 7 minutes early.
You did good.
Thank you.
Reverently, let us go to God in prayer. All-wise, eternal, everlasting God, who art the creator and the maker of both heavens and of earth. Our Father, we come, dear Master, Lord, for this time of thanksgiving. We thank you, Lord, Master God, that we have those people in our community who are so concerned, oh Lord, for the outcome, for the betterment of all humanity. Our Lord, we're so thankful again, Lord, for our officials here, policemen and firemen, and our mayor, Lord, Master, and then we have citizens here who have taken a strong interest in preparing us, Father, for these devastations. We know that you are the Almighty who sits high and looks low, but also we must do some things humanly to prepare and preserve, Father, for the betterment of our future. We just give you all the praise. Keep us all in your care. Lord, let not one fall without the other. Bless and keep us until we all shall meet again. Let us all say amen. Amen. Until we see each other again. God bless you.